Proclaimed by Road & Track to be one of the most focused hot hatches of all time and one of the best Acuras Honda ever built, described by Haggerty to have delivered an engaging driving experience with agile handling, this is the Acura Integra.
It has a 170 horsepower VTEC engine, an 8,000 RPM red line, four-wheel double wishbone suspension, and it's still only the second most fun car on the road. The Acura Integra Sports Coupe. As fun as a car can be, without mustard.
And this is my honest review of my 1996 Acura Integra GS-R that I've owned for just over a year now. Around 6 months ago, I made a full in-depth video describing all of the good things, the bad things, and all the in-between of owning an Integra GS-R, and here I am for an updated 1-year review. I have driven this car a little over 20,000 kilometers since I first purchased it in November of 2023. I spent a lot of time daily driving this car, as well as taking it out to the mountains for some spirited driving. Now, to give this car a proper fair review, I have 5 topics that I'm going to go over and review individually. Those being performance, daily drivability, driver engagement, reliability, and most importantly, in my opinion, aftermarket potential. Now, how it's going to work is I'm going to score each of these categories out of 10 and add them up to give it an overall score. And so without any further ado, let's jump right into it, starting with performance. Now, the GS-R came factory with the B18C1. It's quite similar to the B18C5 that came in the North American Integra Type Rs. However, it is a little bit more toned down, so it could be a bit more of a daily driver engine with a little bit less of a track focus and a little bit more of an enjoyability focus. This engine makes 170 crank horsepower with around 130 foot-pounds of torque, and revving to 8,100 RPM, this car really likes to get down. It likes to get down, in fact, so much that it doesn't actually make a ton of low-end torque. Most of the power that you're gonna feel is above that 4,500 RPM range where VTEC kicks in. However, that point at 4,500 RPM isn't the only point where you're gonna see a power boost. You're also gonna notice a small gain in power at around 5,700 RPM, and that's when the secondary runners open up. Now, this engine, unlike many other VTEC engines that Honda produced, had a very unique intake manifold. And what that looked like was butterfly valves inside the intake manifold that opened and closed depending on your RPM range to give you a better mid-range power. Basically how it works is it sacrifices a tiny little bit of power at the very top end to give you more mid-range power, which thus gives the car a little bit more of a linear power band. Now, I've owned and driven a lot of different cars with different types of VTEC. However, I can confidently say that the VTEC in the GS-R motor is definitely the smoothest feeling. You feel it, however, it's not just a kick in the pants. You're constantly feeling that power gain over the entire RPM range, which is exactly what you want in a car like this. It gives you a good, predictable power band while also making it comfortable to drive. Now, by no means is 170 horsepower a lot of power. However, this car wasn't made to go fast in a straight line. This car was designed to go fast around a track. And how Honda achieved that was with their redesigned version of dual wishbone suspension. And what that looks like is basically a second upper control arm, which allows the car to alter the camber while cornering to achieve the most amount of grip possible. This dual wishbone suspension that Honda used in the Integra is what made this car feel so good to drive, and is also the reason why the Type R was able to claim the title of the best handling front-wheel drive car ever made. Although it may not look like it right out of the box, this car was made to perform well. And it does exactly that. And so because of that, I'm giving this car a rating of 8.5 out of 10 for performance and handling. Now, the next topic that we're gonna get into is daily drivability. Now, this kind of disregards absolutely everything I just talked about with performance, because in a daily driver, it's not really about how fast the car can go around a corner or how fast it can accelerate from 0 to 60. It's more so about how comfortably can this car get me to work? How comfortably can this car get me across the country on a road trip? And how much am I going to enjoy being behind the wheel of this car in stop and go traffic? Now, the first thing I want to mention when it comes to this factor is that this car, specifically the GS-R, only came with a manual option. There was no way you could get an automatic GS-R. So if you're the type to be sitting in traffic every single day, stop and go, you're going to be doing a lot of first gear, second gear in this car, because you don't have an option to even get an automatic if you want. Now, to go over some of the features that this car came with from the factory, the seats they're all right. They're nothing special. They're not uncomfortable, but they're also not the most comfortable seats in the world. It doesn't feel like I'm sitting on a sofa. It doesn't feel like I'm in a Mercedes-Benz. Now, this car also came with ABS. It came with cruise control. It came with power sunroof, power locks, and all of these things are pretty good. You know, that's important. However, overall, this car doesn't just scream like daily driver, most comfortable daily car you can get. If you're wanting something that is, you know, the most comfortable car you can get in to get you to A to B, I would probably recommend staying away from Hondas. However, to be fair, it is a lot better than the majority of cars that were made at the same time. It just doesn't scream pure comfort to me. And for that reason, I'm giving this car a rating of 6 out of 10. Now it's pretty good. It's just not that special. On to the next one, and I'm sure it's probably the one a lot of people want to know the most about, and that is driver engagement. I can say without a shadow of a doubt, this is where this car shines. This car is raw. It feels right, it's proper, it's very mechanical, and you feel really connected with the car when you're driving it. This is a car that you get in and it feels good to drive it. It just gives you that good feeling. Now, I've owned a couple of base model Integras and they don't even give you the same feeling. And I'm sure the Type R is also even more so than the GS-R. Now, in those base model Integras, I have one that I daily drive at the moment actually, and it's good. It's a good car, it's a reliable car, and it's, you know, it's not too bad. But when I get into this thing, it feels like a completely different beast. I've never owned a car or been in a car that I felt more connected to the road while driving. It is a very amazing and very unique driver's feeling. It's not like a lot of front wheel drive cars where you get in them, you know, you have to worry about understeer or anything like that. In fact, it's quite the opposite with this car. You're gonna be fighting oversteer in a GS-R, just the way the suspension is built. And for all of those reasons put together, I have to give this car a 10 out of 10 for driver engagement. It is something special. I don't know how to describe it perfectly, but you have to trust me when I say I can't imagine it getting any better in this chassis. Now, the odds are if you're watching this video, it's because you likely want to buy one of these cars. And for that, this next point is gonna be pretty important for you, and that's reliability. Now, I have to say this car is incredibly reliable. Very rarely have I had anything break on it for me. In fact, in around the year of ownership, there's only been 2 things I've had to replace, and that was the clutch slave and master cylinder. And those together cost me around $50 US total, and each took me around 2 hours of my time. But other than that, I've had no problems with the car. You know, there's been things that I've changed and upgraded, and those 2 things are the only things I've had to do since I've owned this car. And I'm pretty happy about that. And the other thing that also adds to that reliability factor is that it's very easy to work on. This car is built like Legos. You know, they're easily taken apart, easily put back together again. And it's something that anyone can kind of figure out if you have a little bit of mechanical experience. So because of that, I'm going to have to give this car a 9.5. It's not perfect, it's an old car, right? So there's always gonna be little things that you're gonna have to fix on it, little things that'll pop up and whatnot, but for the most part, for what it is, I can't imagine a more reliable car that gives you the same driver experience. And now for the last, but certainly not the least point, that's going to be the aftermarket potential for this car. Hondas, especially these 90s Hondas, Integras included, are very well known for having a huge amount of aftermarket parts and different accessories and all that sort of stuff that you can buy online. These cars are actually quite famous for their aftermarket potential. However, I'm here to tell you it's not as good as it sounds. These cars are great. There's lots of stuff out there for them. However, because these cars are getting older, a lot of these parts are getting to be a lot more valuable. And so because of that, these cars, although, you know, replacement parts are cheap, aftermarket performance parts, not so much. It's getting to be a lot more expensive. For example, if you want to safely properly turbo a VTEC motor such as this one, you're going to be spending probably upwards of $7,000 to $8,000 to do so. And in my books, that is a little bit less than ideal. This is a car that's cheap, it's meant to be cheap, and you should be able to modify it for cheap. Now, don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of things that you can do to this car, and so I'm gonna give it a good rating. However, I'm not gonna give it a 10, even though it probably has some of the best aftermarket support out of any cars ever made. I'm gonna be giving it a 7.5, a 7.5. Now, if the prices of the parts match the value of the car, that would be a different story. But I shouldn't have to spend more than the car's value in order to turbo or make a little bit more power on this thing safely. And that's why I'm giving this car a 7.5. It's great, there's a lot of aftermarket support. However, it's getting to be a lot more expensive, and that's only going to continue to get worse over time. Now, when we go through all of these points together, we add them up, it gives the car an overall rating of an 8.3 out of 10, which I think is pretty fair. This is a really, really good car, and I've loved every single minute of ownership with it. There's actually been nothing about this car that I have disliked, and because of that, I think that a high rating is good. By no means is this car perfect, and that's why it shouldn't have a 10. In fact, I don't think any car deserves a 10. However, I think an 8.3 is worthwhile. I think if it was a Type R, maybe a bit closer to a 9. However, for what this is, for what you're paying, for what you're able to get out of this car, especially for the price and how old it is. But with all this put together, I think this car absolutely deserves a rating of 8.3, if not even higher. But I want to know what you guys think. What do you think of this car? What would you rate it? And is there any topic that you disagreed with me on? Is there anything you would say differently? Or is there any other experiences that you have that maybe I didn't mention? Let me know it all in the comments down below. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, keep it fresh.